Excellent, my leader.
How has been your day? We seem to be having people with we're rating how the day was
Okay.
on a scale of 1 to 5. Most people that have logged in say they've had a great day, rating 4, 5. So hopefully it will be off the chart after this conversation.
We hope so. We hope so, my leader.
Nah, great. So, I mean, given that we've got a constraint on time, I think I'd like us to definitely go in, maybe start by saying good evening and welcome everyone who's joined in on Destiny_Sisters. Thank you for joining this conversation where we're talking all things leadership, talking about leadership in the 21st century. And as House of Destiny, and in particular, Destiny Sisters, whom they've risked of asking me to host this conversation, we are glad and privileged to have you and to host you, Baba Mali, Lincoln Mali. We couldn't have asked for any better speaker than yourself, a leader in community, a leader in your profession, and someone whom I personally know, very passionate and empowering when it comes to leadership and leadership of women, to be precise, and have scars as well as a track record to prove that assertion. So thank you very much for coming through and coming to join us. And we'll definitely want to lean in and glean from your leadership experience.
Thank you, my leader. Thank you for having me.
Great. Maybe let's start at the beginning as numbers of people coming through start to roll up. So who's Lincoln, bit on childhood and, the road to fame, A lot of people have been saying, we joining in, talking to Lincoln. So just for the benefit of our viewers and quite a lot of our listeners, just a brief background on who Lincoln is.
Thank you, my leader. My name is Lincoln Mali. I'm originally from a town called Port Elizabeth. I was born there about 52 years ago. I am married to Spa. We've been married for the last 22 years. We've been together for 30 years. I have 3 children. Lishe, who is about 30, Amara, who's about 19, and Liam, who's 14. And my mother is still alive. My father is late. And I grew up under very strong women who guided me from a young age. And I'm now in the corporate sector working for one of the financial institutions. And I've been in that institution for the last 19 years. So yeah, that's who I am. I'm just a normal, ordinary fellow from Kwazakele Township in Port Elizabeth.
Awesome. Now that's great. Ordinary is very relative, but we'll take it for now. But thank you very much. So let's actually just dive straight to it. And thank you again. Welcome, everyone. We are on a leadership conversation with Lincoln Mali, who is a fellow leader, colleague, and we again privileged to have him here. And we would give you an opportunity to ask questions. There are a couple of questions which we'll go through now, but you can post in or send in your questions so that we ask and learn as much as we can on this subject of leadership. Leadership, we have got vast literature on this notion and concept of leadership. Lots of books, you can put in Google on leadership, your hits would be in the millions. Yes. So just your take on what leadership is, as well as why leadership, the purpose of leadership and the purpose of people who are occupying particular leadership roles and positions, or why leadership in particular from your experience and your take.
I think my view is that our true leaders are hidden in plain sight because we don't see them. We see the people that are in leadership roles and we confuse the two, because leadership doesn't need a title. It's not the title held, it's the influence felt. It's the choice made. It's the decision made. It's the cause championed. So each and every one of us in our sphere of influence can actually make a decision to lead by championing a cause, by standing up for something, by opposing something, or rallying others towards something noble.
That's good.
Where leadership is important is that there is so much in moving history and in making changes that depends on one or two or three people making a decision. When Rosa Parks decided not to move from a seat in a bus, it created a different environment and people were able to follow. When Mother Teresa decided to go and treat the untouchables, that was a decision, right? So it's all of these kinds of things where somebody makes a decision and does something or refuses to do something, and then others are able to follow. And that's why leadership is important.
That's great. So certainly, we certainly confuse role or position in terms of just making that as leadership, whereas it is influence felt, which is great. And in your experience and observation, being a leader, I mean, I love what you mentioned, growing up, particularly under a strong guidance of leaders who were women. You know, what are similarities, differences when it comes to leadership, call it influence, particularly by men or women? Any difference, any similarities, or any what can we learn from that?
I think generally, without generalizing too much about people, women and men can do virtually the same jobs. They can do virtually the same thing. And all of us have got different God-given talents. But for women, more women have got a much more nurturing, capability, and they've got much more of a building capability, and they show more natural empathy and compassion. So when I look at my own parents, the way they brought us up, they both brought a lot into our upbringing. But my mom kind of had more compassion and more caring and more empathy. So I find that in the workplace, women who then continue to maintain their femininity and their womanhood are able to have that extra care, that extra compassion, and that extra passion that men sometimes do not have.
Yeah, and maybe following on that, is there an appreciation of that, particularly by organization? The nurturing aspect, the care aspect. Many of the people on this session are probably coming from an environment where it's like dog eat dog, the survival of the fittest or the elimination of the weakest. What is it that either organizations actually, both for-profit and for non-profit organization, is there an appreciation of that nurturing aspect that women bring on the table as it relates to leadership?
No, there is no appreciation of that. In fact, the dominant discourse on leadership, which is espoused in business schools and so on, is this idea of a macho leader, strong, powerful, their voice counts and they speak for everybody. The reality of leading in the future and now, leading even millennials, you need a much more wide-thinking person who is more compassionate, who's got more empathy and takes people with them. Just look at COVID-19 now. Look at all of the countries that had that model of a bravado. I'm the one, I've got everything all organized.
Yeah.
All those countries have not succeeded. Look at the countries that are led by women, like New Zealand, where Arden found a way of getting an entire community, an entire country, moving behind that. When they had earthquakes, she was leading. When they had terrorism attacks, she was leading. But she hadn't lost who she was. If she wanted to bring a baby to parliament, she would bring a baby to parliament. So one of the things that I'm passionate about is to make young people not to follow this destructive path of thinking that a corporate or a not-for-profit must be dog eat dog. Why should we be ugly in order to succeed? Why should we be ruthless? Why should we be cruel and evil to others in order to succeed? I think that notion is horrible. And I subscribe more to the one of nurturing, helping others, growing others, grooming others, so that as you succeed, you are lifting others in the process.
That's great. No, that's awesome. And maybe taking it back to particularly how your mom played an influential role in the leader that you are. You know, who are some of the, you know, the leaders, particularly women leaders, that have had a much more impactful influence in the person that you are and you continue to become?
I think that my grandmothers, both of them, both on my mother's side and my father's side, my mom, my wife, who's been chiseling me all these years, and also the colleagues the colleagues I've worked with through the years, and my friends who are women. All of these people have had a profound impact on me, because leadership is lifelong learning. We don't just emerge, have known everything, and understand everything. We make a lot of mistakes. We grow from those mistakes, and those influences guide us. I mean, as I grew in my career, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've had people who would say to me, no, don't do that. I would want to organize meetings at 7:30 in the morning. There were people like Ethel Nyembe, Angela Mhlanga, Indira Bagalu, Kanye Chaba, and others who would say to me, you know what, we don't have wives, so we're not going to have the meeting at 7:30. Can we have the meeting at 8:30 because we're dropping off our kids? You learn from that. So there's a lot of learnings. At home, for example, I would come back with all the victories of a corporate life, and then I would come back at home, and then I'm being put in my place and told you didn't do that and that and that, and that grounds you. So all of those influences have had a bearing on my life, and that helps all of us. The key is the humility to listen, the humility to learn, the humility to understand when you've done wrong and kind of make changes. You become a better person over time.
Excellent. So armed with sufficient level of humility, we all grow and become better leaders. I like that. That's great. So I mean, it's a fact that as we shift gears, it's a fact that most roles. So we know that leadership, you know, you don't have to have a title. You know, leadership is influence. You know, however, it's still a fact on this day and age that, again, both in the for-profit organization and non-profit organization, what we would call leadership roles are still occupied predominantly by men. So what is it in your view and your experience men must and can do to create space for women to lead successfully, thrive in those roles as leaders, so that as we grow and we ensure that we lift others up?
Yeah, we have an obligation beyond the slogans. Each one of us has got an obligation in our sphere of influence to make the change. Before we look at what's happening everywhere else, in your own environment, what changes are you prepared to make to create space for women, to empower women, to give learning and development opportunities for women? If I look at my corporate career, as far back as 2001, and I guess I'm showing my age, in Zimbabwe, I remember one of my first appointments was to appoint our CEO to run the bank in Zimbabwe, Pindi Nyandoro. I mean, it was a very controversial act because there was a lot of controversy around that appointment. And the board resigned. And we had problems with the Reserve Bank. And I had to make a decision. And my decision was, let's go reconstitute the board, and we'll come back with the same candidate, follow the right process, and for Pindi Nyandoro to be appointed. Pindi today is a regional CEO who runs about 6 or 7 of our countries. Again, 2001 in Zambia, I remember walking in there. I was the regional CE, and I was welcomed by the 10 men at the airport. And I said, is this the EXO? They said, yes. I said, where are the women? They said, oh, Lincoln, we must tell you, in Zambia we do things differently. I said, no, where are the women? And within a short space of time, we had amazing women in our team. Gwen Mwaba, Yando Mulaisho, all of these guys coming into our exco. In Malawi, I did exactly the same thing. And so I've followed that in all of the positions I've had in my career. You have to follow your conviction, not look at whether it's acceptable, whether others agree. You have to make your decisions and say, in my teams, there will be women, and they will have a voice, and they will be paid fairly, and they will be given all the good projects. They will be given all of the opportunities as you give to men. Once you do that, over time, you become better and better, because more women then also influence you because they're in the team. So that's what I found in my view. And that's what I then challenge most men who are my friends, people I know. I ask them, don't talk about what is being done in society. What are you doing in your sphere of influence? The same way as there were white people that stood up during the time of apartheid and said, not in my name. I will not stand for this. We as men have to stand up and say, patriarchy, not in my name. Misogyny, not in my name. Bigotry, not in my name. And start to act so that our daughters don't have to deal with this.
That's excellent. No, that's excellent. I mean, I know that over and above, I can definitely attest to, as I said earlier on, you're probably among the few who've got scars and proof of the fact that you can entrust women with meaningful roles, projects, and they excel without having to disappoint you. And maybe to some of the uncomfortable conversations either that have been held with you, particularly by women whom either have felt left behind. Just share an experience, one or so of those, and maybe as tips for ladies on the call on how to hold these uncomfortable position or conversations, whether at home or in society or in the organizations that they are involved in, so that it is clear that they can't be left behind.
I think that if I take the home, because again, it's very difficult for somebody who is a chauvinist at home suddenly to be believing in gender equity at work. So some of those things start at home. So I remember a conversation I had with my wife, which was a very uncomfortable conversation, because she said, actually, I want to stop working and I want to raise our kids. Now, we met at varsity. I knew her capability. I knew how great she is and how far she could go in the corporate world. But she said to me, I'm not one of the Standard Bank people you want to motivate. This is my choice. I want to raise our kids. That was a decision we took 10 years ago. When I look back, it was the best decision we took. But the most important thing there was that it was her choice. This is what she wanted. She didn't see herself climbing the corporate ladder. So it was not my dream, it was her dream, what she wanted. If we come to the corporate environment, the issues women have raised with me are the sense of the voice not being heard in a meeting, where a woman raises an issue. 3 guys later raise other issues and everybody say they agree. But the first point was raised by that person. Secondly, the being labeled as being emotional. where somebody raises an issue and then somebody says you're being emotional. We have those conversations, and I say to them, okay, I am emotional, but we're still going to have the conversation. Because to say you are being emotional is a label to silence you. We've had conversations, some of them have been so deep, that have enabled me to work with women by understanding their full environment. I say, for example, to young leaders, there is no manual given by organizations about how to support a woman who's going through a divorce. It needs you as a leader to be present. How do you support a woman who's in an abusive relationship? It needs you to be present. How do you support a woman in your team who wants to have children but cannot have children? How do you support a woman who has got a child with disability? There are all these things. They constitute the full person. So all of these conversations over the years I've been able to have with women who are my colleagues, and they made me a better leader because I could understand those things and journey with people on those things.
Excellent. We welcome those who have recently joined us. A very insightful, impactful conversation with Lincoln Mali on leadership and all things leadership, and particularly leadership, women as leaders. We have covered the fact that leadership is influence, armed with sufficient levels of humility, particularly as men. We can create space for women to thrive in the roles that they play. There's no need for us to be scared to kind of lead together, because indeed we are better together as leaders. You know, Marida, one of the things that would often be referred or mentioned is, you know, we survive, or maybe let's just ask directly, how do you survive an inhumane leadership and really rise up from there and, you know, believe in yourself, continue to say, you know what, irrespective of a horrible experience that I may have gone through under a specific leader or a leadership environment, you know, how do you survive that? How do you, you know, help someone to believe in themselves and saying that, you know what, you still can lead irrespective of the past that you have experienced?
I think this is one of the most difficult things. Each and every one of us have to develop resilience. To be able to deal the storms that will come to you. These storms come whether you are in a relationship, whether you are in a marriage, or in a corporate setting, or in parliament, or in a government job. There are times where there are people against you, or there's a toxic environment against you, or there's an oppressive leader, or there are people conniving about you. Your faith is important in times like that, because it is difficult, it is very lonely. Secondly, the people closest to you are your pillar of strength. I've always found that my wife and the most closest people to me, I call them a council of advisors. I have a council of advisors in my life. My wife has given herself the title of CEO of that council of advisors. She's not elected, but she gives regular solicited or unsolicited advice. Those people also help you, because sometimes in a conflict situation, you must also find out whether have you also contributed to the environment, or are you exacerbating a situation like that? And thirdly, it's what's your value system? What's your own values in an environment like that? And lastly, you have to choose your responses. And then at a particular time, just like in any other environment, you have to say, should I call it quits? Should I now leave? Is it too toxic for me? Is it destroying me? And so whenever I've had these situations in a corporate sense, I've always had that fire in my belly, where there's a burning desire to do more for others. And sometimes when I'm going through difficulties at work, I remember that there are thousands of people in my organization who look up to me, who have no access to the committees I've got access to, who doesn't have the voice that I have. And if
Yes.
I'm giving up, what about them? And so I sometimes brush those things that I go through and then just keep on fighting, because there is a cause much, much bigger than me and that I have to fight for. But all of us, resilience is very, very important.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. And how do you advise someone, I guess, how do you advise someone in grow as they grow in their leadership mantle, in terms of preparing yourself to be to stay relevant as a leader, or to ensure that you are effective in your leadership role?
I think probably the following things are important. The first one is bring yourself to work. I see tragic stories of people who are walking into a corporate and then they put on a corporate mask because somebody told them, in order to succeed, you have to sound like this, look like this, wear like this, dress like this, do like this.
Yeah.
It's so tragic. I've been in my organization for 19 years. I'm the same person that walked in on day one, and I'll be the same person when I leave. Nobody should change me for corporate success. So being who I am is very important to me, because the titles of my organizations cannot define me. So if I'm fired by my organization tomorrow and I'm walking the streets of Joburg, I must still be Lincoln. So that identity and pride in who you are is very important for me. The second thing is about feedback. Feedback is very important. As you grow as a leader, get feedback from people about what you're doing well, where can you improve, and what are some of the things that are your blind spots. That helps you enormously. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of humility, and a lot of self-confidence to get feedback and work on the feedback. And last but not least is always improving yourself, learning all the time, making yourself relevant. And also, sometimes you're thrown in the deep end. You go into a role and you have no clue about that role. You have no clue about that environment. In those first few weeks, sometimes you're like you're watching tennis in Wimbledon. You're doing this. You don't know the terms they use. That's when, and you want to fast track the learning. But just know the people who chose you knew what they were doing. Trust them. Nobody was born in that job. Nobody was born knowing. You will also get to know. And I think people go through that. And sometimes younger leaders look at more senior leaders and think that their path was very linear.
Yeah.
But most people's lives and careers are a zigzag. Lots of ups and downs. And so you have to manage through, those peaks and troughs.
That's good. No, that's good. And I mean, with the again, welcome everyone who's just recently joined us in conversation with Lincoln on leadership in the 21st century. Please send through your questions if you have questions on this conversation. I think a lot of people have loved this self-appointed CEO on the Council of Advisors. It might be a new role placed in a number of places. So power to the CEO, and it doesn't seem to have any time frame or when it ends. No, that's good. No, that's good. I mean, we're going through quite a lot of things changing around us. Volatile environment, going through where we find ourselves now, navigating the complexities of COVID-19, impacting right across, whether it's family, in communities, whether you are a political party, whether you are a corporate, small, big business. So what would be your sage advice to leaders as they lead through this uncertain, volatile time?
Yeah, if I start maybe with COVID, there is an important theme that I like to use as I talk to leaders across the countries where I work during this time. I say to them, we all face the same storm, yet we are in different boats. So it's very important for a leader to be conscious of the boat that they are in, and manage that boat so that that boat doesn't sink. But simultaneously, have the empathy and the compassion to worry about the other boats that people in their team might be going through. Their clients might be going through. Their suppliers might be going through. That gives you such a wide view of the world. Secondly, empathy and compassion, which were difficult things for many leaders that they needed to learn about, that they looked at maybe sometimes disparagingly and says those are soft issues. They are more needed now. Compassion and empathy is more needed now as we try and rally people in a very difficult environment, as we're trying to live or coexist with a deadly virus. Thirdly, I think that all of us have to learn new skills because the environment is changing very fast. Nobody knew about COVID. So as a leader, you now have to know COVID. If there's going to be digital transformation, you have to immerse yourself to understand digital transformation so that you can help your staff, help your clients and others to understand that digital transformation. And lastly, something that is not taught a lot in business schools. We have to get more leaders to understand what is called paradox thinking or paradox style of leadership. Paradox style of leadership goes away from the traditional black or white. Yes or no. Either or. Because in a volatile environment, a lot of things are and. So think about it. In the traditional sense, somebody would say, I'm looking at saving my company because of COVID. But what about the future? Because you could save the business now, then it's dead tomorrow. You have to do both. You're going to worry about today and you're going to worry about the future. Somebody would say, okay, there's new technologies in digital transformation, so therefore I must invest more in technology. Yes, but you still have to worry about your people. You got to do both. So this concept of paradox mindset says you don't have to resolve sometimes contradictory things. For a while, sometimes you carry both of them with you until you get to a point where you have to resolve these things. And these are some of the challenges that we face today.
Great. So it's really transition and managing in the arena of ends rather than either or.
Indeed.
And sometimes probably having to have the wisdom to know what is it that you need to solve, or a problem to solve, or a tension to manage, so that you can be able to navigate this through quite well.
Think about it. We are all uncomfortable with ambiguity. We are uncomfortable with the gray. We are uncomfortable with uncertainty. Now, all of those things are built into a changing environment. So there are no easy answers. There are no off-the-shelf formulas. So if you are a command and control type of leader, you will want to have all the answers. But in fact, a more empowering leader, a more engaging leader will find some pearls of wisdom from their stakeholders, from their teams, and maybe these things that you're carrying, some of the answers are lying from others beyond yourself.
That's great. That's great. Again, welcome, and you are most welcome to bring your own questions. We'll go slightly personal, my leader, for now. I think we are all warm and all free-flowing. Just in terms of, as a leader, how do you lead yourself on a day-to-day basis? There is this notion that says, one best form of, or one indicator of a person's ability to lead others is how they lead themselves. What's your view, your take on that, and how does it translate in your own life?
You know, I'm a firm believer of that. And the first thing you have to do is to know thyself. The Oracle of Delphi says, know thyself.
Yeah.
You know, we are not gods.
Yes.
We are fallible human beings with lots of mistakes and lots of problems. So you have to know who you really are. Not when others are looking, but you got to know who you are so that you know how to manage yourself and know how to lead yourself. Because you cannot lead anybody, nor change anything unless you have the ability to know yourself. So I am my harshest critic. I criticize myself more than anybody else. I judge myself more than anybody else. And I'm constantly trying to change myself because that's important. If I can give you something practical, let's take now in the COVID environment. There are a couple of things that are important for me to lead and change myself in the context of COVID. The first one is, most people who know me know I love people, meeting people, hugging people, high fives. Now there's no people.
Yeah.
Right? So the first thing I had to do was to deal with the reality of today, not what I yearn for. I had to deal with that reality day one, that I'm not going to see many people. I am now in this environment. How do I deal with that? Secondly, I had to deal with my personal health. Because how do I lead many people about their personal health when my own personal health was not being looked at? I'm not the fittest of people. My wife is the one who's more a fitness fanatic. I had to take her lead and focus on my fitness. She likes running. I like walking. I now had to walk more to remain fitter. I had to look at a changed diet. I've been eating more leaves, my leader, over the last 5 months than I have in a long time. But I've had to take multivitamins and all these things to boost my immunity system. Thirdly, I had to look at my mental health because I have to get out of the toxic thing of Teams meetings from 7 to 7. No, get out of it.
Yeah.
I had to learn new skills. You know, so all of those things are things that are just an example of what I have had to do to change myself and lead myself into a different environment. Because I can't ask others to do these things when I can't do them myself.
That's good. No, that's good. No, that's good. So there are questions that have come through in here. I'll try and read them as I see them. In the 21st century, we still have talks about gender pay gap in South Africa and globally. How do you approach this in your sphere of influence, understanding that this is an entrenched corporate culture? So certainly this growing gender pay gap, which is it's a global phenomenon. You know, how are you approaching and looking and thinking about this in your sphere of influence?
So in every job I've ever taken, this is one of the first things I focus on. And in my current job, this week, I think it is, or was it last week, but I announced to my team that for the first time, because I've been in the job for 4.5 years, we've not only met salary parity in my area, we've exceeded salary parity, which means on all the grades in my team, women are paid more than men. And again, I want to go back to this thing. It's easy to talk about a corporate. It's what I can do in my sphere of influence. So that when I'm challenging others, I say, this is how I did it. And the example of how I did it was very simple. I was doing it with my team. I outlined to everybody up front that, guys, look at the gap. This gap is unacceptable, and we're going to resolve it. How did we resolve it? Firstly, when people come into our team from another company or whatever, people might not negotiate hard. We say we must pay them a good market rate, even if they've not negotiated. Secondly, when you are promoting people, you make sure you have the gender gap in mind. Thirdly, when you are giving bonuses at the end, increases at the end of the year, you do exactly the same thing. Market assessments of where people's salaries are at. Once you keep on doing that, you start to see that the gender gap starts to close and we've been able to do it. And in all my other jobs, I've done it exactly the same thing, working with my team in HC and working with my fellow leaders. And if you're not measuring it, you'll never see the progress. You have to do a dipstick. Where are we now in my team or my area? And then start working at it. And over time, you are able to get it done. So I'm so proud of what we've been able to achieve as a team.
No, congratulations and well done. It's definitely a topical issue. I mean, I can agree with you. Even in some of the areas, it's an issue that we are engaged in and assist with currently. And there's lots of people asking for where do they send their CVs to. No, but well done, my leader. That's great. But I mean, it's probably. I mean, we did touch on the role that men can play in actually being intentional about dealing with these things. Anything else that you probably would want to add as to just how do we really become alive to these things and move away from slogans, and maybe what is the hindrance? What in your view is hindering those in authority to do it?
Yeah. So my advice to both men and women who believe in this cause is to say it's okay to do it at a country level, corporate level, but it's more impactful when we're challenging in our environment, challenging your organization and your team, our leaders, to say, how are we going to change this? How can we help to change this? And we change things in that way, and then it starts to become something big. My fear is that when we say corporates are not paying or government's not paying, whatever, everybody agrees or doesn't agree, and it ends there.
Yeah.
We are not able to zero in by taking certain actions. I mean, one of my biggest bugbears is August. I mean, I think you, because we are very close and I've always respected you, I agree to come and talk to your audience. But normally, I flatly refuse to have any discussion with anybody about women's issues in August, as a matter of principle. Because I found that August has become this thing where sometimes it's commoditized, sometimes it's a big celebration. Then what happens in September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August? So women's issues or the women agenda is a 312 days of the year issue. It's a 12 months issue, and we must tackle it in that way so that we continue to do that and not allow corporates to now come and say, hey, come here, Matapelo, please come here, Kacheko, and please come here, Nosipo. We'll do a picture and showcase women leaders or women in our team. That's August. Then September, Dololu. So we must continue to put the pressure because this is unacceptable. Our daughters cannot be paid less than our sons. If that happens, it's because we haven't acted, all of us. What pressure have we put as men who are in leadership roles? What have we done? Women, what pressure have you put in your organization? It's not going to be easy. These are battles to be won. They can't be lost because we are fearful of the repercussions. There are huge repercussions, but the cause is just.
Certainly. No, that's great. And I mean, part of the things that would happen in organizations is politics. Politics either around peers or politics with your principals. How have you managed and navigated through politics in organizations? Which let me just end there.
I've had my fair share of politics, conflicts, being undermined, being overlooked, being ostracized. But there's something bigger. There is a cause bigger than me. So when I go through those things, I just remind myself of the things that I'm here for, the bigger battles that I have to fight. One of the things I always say to young leaders is that leadership is not drama. You shouldn't have drama when you're a leader. Because just imagine, I come to work and I have had maybe a disagreement with my wife, and I have words with her, and she has paragraphs with me. And then I come to work and I'm upset. The people at work do not deserve to get a bad image of me. Because when I walk in, they expect to see a leader who can greet, who's receptive, and all of that. Equally, I might have had a horrible day at work. My family can't be carrying the toxicity that comes from work. So I always say to people, if you want to see my drama, you will see it between work and home. That's where I vent and I play music at the top and do all of that. But in the end, all of these politics and all of these things are, they pale into insignificance if I think about the larger cause and the things that one has to do. Those are much, much bigger issues. And so, you have down days, you have days where you're upset, but you get back on your horse and you do what needs to be done.
No, that's great. Sure. No. I think your point around leadership not being drama, and certainly few words and others with multiple paragraphs on sometimes simple issues, but we
Be
take
very
the
careful,
drama
my leader.
in
This might cost you.
No, good. I mean, we probably are left with 5 minutes. Such a wonderful insights and conversations that we've had. Maybe just reflect on two things. Maybe just 3 books that have largely influenced you as a person, as a leader, and maybe just a failure that you've experienced and how you kind of survived that and continued with your journey.
I think if I just think offhand, Teto Nyati's book has just been amazing. Betting on a Darkie. Marcus Buckingham's book that says, Now Discover Your Strengths, is a fundamental philosophy of how I lead. I build on people's strengths and I just ask them to work on their weaknesses. I think many corporates spend a lot of time on people's weaknesses and they're asked to work on long PDPs on their weaknesses instead of developing people's strength and make them the best.
Yeah.
But the book that's probably had the biggest profound influences on me is by Professor Clay Christensen, who gave us a lecture at school called How Will You Measure Your Life? And that was a turning point for me because it said to me, how will I want to contribute to a different life? So all of the things that I do are now based on that. That says, when you die, it's not the money you had, it's not the mansions or the cars, it's the contribution that you made, that you had.
Yeah.
So I've now dedicated my life to growing young leaders, and that came from that conversation from Professor Clay Christensen and his book on how will you measure your life. If I think of one of the lowest moments in my career, in my life, was in 2010. We had a terrible, terrible retrenchment at work. And we had to retrench people. Most people don't realize, even if you're not the decision maker about retrenchment, by virtue of your role, you have to partake in the retrenchment of people. And one of the people I had to retrench was somebody that I admire, I really loved, who was a woman executive in my team. But she was 8 months pregnant of a very complicated pregnancy.
Sure.
That was painful. I had to call her husband and talk to him to say, could I come to the house and do the consultation there rather than she come to the organization?
Great.
And she said, and he said, what are the chances do you think that she's going to agree to that? And I said, yeah, well, knowing her, she's not going to agree. And when I talked to her, she said, I'm going to be there for my team. And so after that retrenchment exercise, it haunted me because I was holding thumbs that the baby was born without any hassle, because it was a very complicated pregnancy, and this was a child that they so desperately wanted. And so for 6 months afterwards, I tried to reach out, and she wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't want to engage with me. And only, I think, after 6 or 8 months, she was now in a position that we could talk, and she could now talk about what had happened. And she had done her own investigation, and she had come and said, actually, I think the decisions that you made and the things that you did were right, and we're still very good friends today. And so even now I'm writing, I think I've just written and published an article on guiding leaders who have to retrench people because of my emotions about what it meant in that instance. So that's one of the lowest moments and moments of failure for me.
Wow. My leader, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, the hour has come to an end. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for being the leader that you are. You're making a huge impact and, a great contribution to a lot of leaders, young leaders, old leaders. We are the better because of your life, of your family, of your leadership. We greatly appreciate that. There are quite a number of questions which we will forward to you, and through your blogs and your social media platforms, I'm sure you'll be able to cover those, and others will be able to follow through. We will have this conversation because we've recorded it so that people can, again, lead and learn. But thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Great and insightful conversation. Much, much appreciated, sir.
Thank you, my leader.
Excellent, my leader.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. We will be connecting next week again, and look for details on Destiny Sister Alignment Conference. Quite a lot of these things will still be further explored. But thank you very much for joining in. Have a wonderful and a blessed evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you.